Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rewilded Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Lydia Joy. We have about 1 week of official winter left, and honestly, March is just doing what March always does here in the North, completely confusing everyone. One day it's, in the 70s, even up to 80. You're outside in shorts and a tank top, feeling like it's May and March. And then the next day, they're calling for snow. And I don't know, it feels a little more extreme than it used to, or maybe I'm just paying closer attention. But I've been out in the garden as much as possible, getting all my beds prepped, starting early seeds, thinking about what needs to be rebuilt and cleaned up after a long winter. And, guys, I can't help but keep noticing how much gardening and this work feel like the same conversation. Both are about ecosystem, balance, structure, resilience, rebuilding capacity. And here's the thing that I keep coming back to. Healthy soil has a structure, right? It's supposed to hold water. It's supposed to regulate what microbes thrive. It filters what moves through it and protects what stays put. But when the soil loses that structure, when it gets compacted or depleted or stripped, everything just like washes through. Nutrients leach out, pathogens take over, the whole ecosystem becomes unstable no matter what you plant in it. And the gut barrier works a lot like that, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Before I get into it, this podcast is listener supported, and I genuinely appreciate every single person who shows up here. If this work has been helpful to you, useful to you, there are a few ways that you can support the show. You can leave a rating or review on iTunes or Spotify. You can drop a comment on Spotify on each episode or on YouTube. Or you can send me a DM on Instagram and let me know you've been listening. That kind of feedback really means way more than you know. And if you want to financially support the show, that option is available too, completely optional, but there's a link in the show notes for you to do that. Now, on to who this episode is for. Honestly, I'm not sure who it isn't for. If you're living in a human body in 2026, this is going to be relevant. But specifically, I'm thinking about people who feel like every system in their body has some kind of problem, right? You no longer know what food you can eat without feeling bad. Your digestion is off. Your skin is reactive. Your mood and hormones are all over the place. You're exhausted but wired. You get sick more than you think you should, or you never fully recover when you do, or maybe you get cyclical headaches that you can't pinpoint, have a lot of body tension and pain. Foods that used to be fine now create a reaction that you can't predict. You've tried plenty of things. Some of them helped a little, none of them helped, right? That constellation of experience and symptoms, it feels like 10 different problems, right? It's often one problem, and it is a system problem. It's also a boundary problem, and that boundary is your gut barrier. And I want to talk about what that actually means. So, what the gut barrier actually is, right? Because a lot of people think of the gut barrier as like a lining, right? Like this kind of like this membrane sitting between your digestive tract and the rest of your body, almost like it's something passive, something that either holds or it doesn't. And it's not that. It's actually like more of a living ecosystem than we realize. It's kind of similar in some regard to the soil in the garden. It has layers, right? And each one does a specific job, and each one is dependent on the others, right? So that outermost layer is mucus. It's a thick, continuously regenerating gel, and it's produced by those specialized cells called goblet cells. This is your first line of defense. And it's not just like lubrication, if you will. It's an actual habitat because that's where your beneficial microbes live. They live in it and they feed on it and they signal through it. And in return, they help maintain it. So the mucus layer is what keeps bacteria at the right distance from your gut wall. And when it's healthy and thick, things stay where they're supposed to. Now, when it thins from all the things, right? Chronic stress, poor diet, dysbiosis, inflammation, antibiotics, blah, 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 that distance disappears. Now, beneath that mucus is a single layer of epithelial cells, one cell thick, and that all stands between the contents of your digestive tract and your bloodstream. And these cells are connected by tight junction proteins, essentially that door that locks between cells. And when those locks are intact, they decide what gets through. Nutrients in, everything else out, to simplify it. And then woven through all of it is your microbial community, right? Hundreds of species producing signals, regulating immune tone, feeding the cells that maintain the barrier itself. They're not passengers in the system. They are part of the structure. So when I talk about a compromised gut barrier, I'm not talking about one thing breaking down. I'm talking about an ecosystem losing its integrity, right? The mucus thins, tight junctions loosen, the microbial community shifts, the immune tissue just beneath that lining, which is constantly sampling what crosses, stops being able to distinguish between what's safe and what isn't. And when that happens, the body stops feeling like a safe place to live in, right? Food becomes unpredictable. Your immune system starts treating normal things like threats. Inflammation spreads systemically through the body, and you end up chasing symptoms that keep multiplying because the boundary generating all of them was never addressed. That's what we're actually dealing with, not 10 separate problems, one compromised ecosystem. So what breaks it down? I've talked about this so many times, right? There's so many layers. And this is where we all need to keep connecting these dots, right? That we aren't really connecting when we're in our pain body. So we're stepping outside of that for a minute to get that big picture again. Because the reality is the things that break down the gut barrier, they're not like mysterious at all, right? They're not rare. They're just the accumulated weight of being alive in a modern body in a world that was, radically changing and not just designed to support that, right? Obviously, if we start with food, we all know the modern food situation, right? If you grew up eating processed food, low fiber, packaged meals, fast food, cereal for breakfast, bread for lunch, most of us did, your gut lining has been underfed for most of your life. Bottom line, okay? So your beneficial microbes, they eat fiber, complex, diverse plant fiber. Without it, they decline. So that mucus layer thins. And then the cross-feeding networks that maintain the barrier integrity start to break down. And if that's been your baseline since childhood, your gut barrier never had the inputs it needed to develop the proper integrity in the first place, right? It was like most of us were not giving the right raw materials, like from the start. That's most people, right? Obviously, there's antibiotics, right? Antibiotics, anti-life. I am not going to have a conversation here about whether they're necessary or justified. That is not the point. The point is this. If you took a course of antibiotics at any point in your life, of course, that I don't know anyone who's only taken one, right? Every single client I ask, it's been 10 plus. Rarely is anyone under 10. Right. Especially if you take it later in life and suddenly you realize, oh my God, my body never quite felt the same after the fact, right? That's because they don't discriminate. They clear out beneficial species alongside harmful things too, right? So those keystone organisms, those species that are supposed to produce the compounds that your gut lining actually runs on are being hit up, right? They also help maintain your mucus layer. They hold your barrier together, right? And they don't always just bounce back very easily on their own because why? Well, usually you don't have the right substrate available for them to do so. And so for many people, especially after multiple courses, and I've had people that take upwards of 100, they don't come back at all without deliberate work. Um, Obviously chronic stress, modern life, right? Excuse me. Um, I feel like, hearing stress affects the gut has become so generic, it's lost its meaning, but your gut lining regenerates every 3 to 5 days, right? However, that regeneration requires your nervous system to be able to access like that parasympathetic state, right? Um, and that requires the right conditions, right? You got to have adequate minerals, appropriate light exposure, spaciousness in your life to be able to have genuine rest, right? A nervous system that actually has enough voltage to get into the right repair mode, right? And so when people are running on stress hormones around the clock, that repair cycle never completes, right? And then, of course, the barrier can erode faster than it can rebuild. And over months and years, that gap just widens. And of course, voltage matters here more than most people realize, right? Low voltage in the body from chronic stress, which depletes the minerals, which likely weren't there in the first place because of the diet I talked about just a minute ago, right? Inadequate light exposure, poor hydration. All of that means your cells don't have the charge they need to maintain the tight junction integrity, as well as to regulate your immune function or even drive the repair processes the barrier depends on. We have to remember we're all an electrical system, and many people in the modern world are running on like batteries that are depleted or can't hold a charge, right? And so, in that situation, the body cannot maintain its boundaries. Obviously, there's a lot of environmental inputs modern life creates for us, right? All of that affects the gut, right? Heavy metal exposure. There's so many ways we can be exposed, right? Environmental toxins, modern chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, endocrine disruptors, plastics, the things saturating the air, the water, the food supply, the household products. These aren't fringe concerns. They're the water we're all swimming in, and they selectively deplete beneficial species and damage the epithelial lining and create an inflammatory environment hostile to the barrier repair. And then, of course, there's what some people inherited before they even had a choice, right? If your mother's gut barrier was compromised or her microbiome was compromised and the microbial seeding that you received at birth reflected that, some people are starting from that level of imbalance that goes back a generation or more, right? I'm going to say inner soil, your microbiome was already challenged before you even got going in life, right? If we think about it from that bigger picture, we destroyed the soil, right? Literally and figuratively. Modern agricultural practices strip the microbial diversity from the food we've eaten, right? The food that was um, grown in the soil that modern practices, created it just carries a fraction of the mineral and microbial richness it once did. So the gut barrier problems that I'm seeing, listen, guys, it's not an individual person's failure. Like, it's just the downstream consequences of the world we're in and a global food system that really just dismantled the very foundation human health runs on. So, when someone comes to me feeling like everything is falling apart, like every system in their body has a problem, like nothing they try holds, I'm not surprised. I'm looking at someone whose barrier has been eroding for years, maybe decades, under conditions that were never designed to support it. Not trying to be pessimistic here. I'm trying to clarify things because when you know what has broken down, you know what it actually takes to rebuild it. All right. If you want to go deeper on the generational piece specifically, I covered that last year in 2 previous episodes. One is called How Maternal Microbiomes Shape Immune Health, and the other is Healing Burnout: How Mothers and Environment Shape Our Health. So both links will be in the show notes for you if you want to go back and check those out. Um, whether you're a mother or not, or if you're wanting to become one, obviously we all have a mother and we came from our mother. So, if you're trying to understand why your baseline feels like it was already compromised before you even started, those episodes are worth your time. So let's get into it even more. What a compromise barrier actually feels like. This is a section where I want you to stop and actually listen for yourself, because barrier compromise doesn't always announce itself the way you'd expect. Most people associate gut issues with digestive symptoms: bloating, gas, loose stools, constipation. And yes, those can absolutely be a part of it. But a compromised gut barrier is a systemic problem. It doesn't stay in the gut. And some of the most significant signs have nothing to do with digestion at all, right? It's the nervous system that won't settle. It's the constant low-grade activation, an inability to fully relax even when life circumstances are calm, right? When the barrier is compromised and endotoxins are circulating, excuse me, your immune system is running a threat response around the clock. Your nervous system feels that. It stays on guard because biologically something is actually wrong. And this isn't like some version of anxiety that's like a character flaw, which is unfortunate when people feel that way. It's really your nervous system accurately responding to an inflammatory signal it cannot turn off. So you experience things. You have skin that keeps reacting, right? Like eczema, rashes, unexplained breakouts, chronic dryness, redness that comes and goes without a clear trigger, right? Like everyone I talk to has some kind of skin thing that they know. Like if it flares up, I know something's going on deeper, right? Because your skin's an immune organ. And when the gut barrier fails to contain inflammatory signals, the skin often becomes the next boundary where that inflammation expresses itself. Excuse me. And then we have joint pain, body aches that don't have a clear structural cause, right? Like people will be like, oh, I threw my back out. Well, you know, my back feels like it's frozen. My shoulder feels like it's frozen, right? No, there's no clear structural cause. Like you didn't actually have a injury, right? Because when inflammatory proteins cross that compromised barrier and enter circulation, they land in the connective tissue, and people get told they have arthritis, fibromyalgia, unexplained inflammation. When really sometimes what they have is a gut barrier that stopped containing the load. Okay, then we have mood instability that doesn't match circumstances, or maybe it does, but people feel a version of depression, anxiety, irritability, emotional dysregulation that just feels disproportionate, right? Now, your gut produces a significant portion of your neurotransmitters, and your gut bacteria directly influence your brain chemistry through the gut-brain axis. So when that barrier is compromised and the microbial community is disrupted, that signaling becomes very dysregulated. This word is something we use a lot. That signaling becomes loud. It becomes chaotic. It becomes intense. Okay. How's that? We'll stop using dysregulated so much, right? And people spend years, right? Maybe they're in therapy. Maybe they're on a medication. But it's really, there's something going on that has a significant physiological root, right? A lot of people are getting sick and not fully recovering, or it's taking them a long time to recover. So a compromised barrier means that your immune system is perpetually occupied managing internal inflammatory load. So it has less capacity to respond to actual external threats. So you catch everything that goes around, or you get something mild and it lingers for weeks. Okay. This is an exhausted immune system, basically. right? People are like, why can't I recover? Why does it take me weeks? It's in your gut, my friends. Then, of course, we have the whole thyroid and hormonal dysregulation, right? Like everyone's saying my hormones are a mess, right? Or wondering if something's wrong with their thyroid. And sometimes this one surprises people, but your gut is deeply involved in hormone metabolism, including thyroid hormone conversion. Because the barrier compromise and the systemic inflammation that follows can disrupt hormone signaling in ways that can look like a thyroid problem or a hormone problem on the surface, but really have a gut root underneath. Right? It's like the soil. If you think about the soil and you think about comparing it to your microbiome, it makes sense, right? Like everything that is supposed to come out of healthy soil matters, right? Same is true with your microbiome. And then there's one that brings most people to me eventually, like the accumulating list, right? The food, I don't know what to eat anymore. I used to be able to eat this. Now I can't eat this. And I don't know. I eat this now and now I feel this way. And they like it's basically all these foods are stacking on each other and people can't like pinpoint what they're reacting to anymore. And they're like, I don't even know what to eat. Or maybe they took supplements and they thought they were going to help and they just don't really seem to help. Or worse, they create reactions. Right? So basically, there's just this sense that your tolerance for everything is shrinking and you don't know why. And you're left with, I don't even know WTF to do. Right? And this isn't some random sensitivity. It's the immune system has lost its ability to be able to distinguish between safe and dangerous because that boundary that was supposed to make that distinction is no longer holding. All right. So when the barrier breaks down, the body stops feeling like a safe place to live in and everything starts to feel like a threat because your immune system in that state, everything is being treated like one. And until that boundary has begun to be repaired, you can chase every symptom individually forever and never get to the bottom of it. Now we have a mineral catch 22 to talk about. This is the part that explains why so many people supplement for years without really getting very far. If you think about soil, a thriving garden, for example, doesn't just need nitrogen. It needs the full mineral matrix. It needs all the things, right? Calcium, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, sulfur, iron, manganese, copper, zinc, boron, all of it present, all of it bioavailable, all of it in the right ratios relative to each other, right? You can grow things in depleted soil, by the way, but what grows there will reflect the deficiency. It will be structurally compromised. It'll be less resilient and it'll be more vulnerable to stress and disease, right? Your gut barrier works kind of the same way. It doesn't run on one or two minerals, it runs on all of them. Every enzymatic process involved in tissue repair, in immune regulation, in that mucus production, and the integrity of the tight junctions, and cellular regeneration has a mineral requirement underneath it. So when the mineral train is, let's say, depleted, to keep it simple, doesn't mean you don't have any minerals there, but it means you don't have enough reserve, right? And this is almost universal in people with chronic health patterns. I don't even want to say almost. It really is universal because, you know, I've seen thousands of people's hair tests. And so the barrier can't rebuild properly regardless of what else you're doing, right? Now, maybe you've heard about zinc. It gets the most attention in this conversation and for good reason because tight junction proteins, those structures, remember those structures that hold your epithelial cells together and regulate what crosses the barrier? They actually require zinc to form and maintain their integrity. Zinc is also essential for the immune cells lining your gut, for tissue repair, for the goblet cells that produce your mucus layer. And when zinc is depleted, the barrier loosens, full stop. Now, copper is equally important. Um, it's required for connective tissue integrity throughout the body, including the gut lining. And it works in direct relationship with zinc. And this relationship matters because most people are, you know, well, for a while, most people were supplementing zinc without attention to copper because we got scared of copper for a while in the mineral world. But over time, this can create an imbalance that causes its own set of problems, right? We can see that in the copper zinc ratio on the hair test. I haven't seen very many good ones, quite frankly. So this plays a part in this whole conversation, right? We also know that copper is critical for immune function and for the enzymatic processes that drive cellular repair. So, if you have a copper deficient body, it's not going to be able to rebuild tissue properly. Then, of course, magnesium. We can't ever go anywhere without talking about magnesium. It actually supports our gut motility, it supports our nervous system, hundreds of enzymatic processes involved in cellular regeneration. So, a low magnesium body is a body where the nervous system just cannot access the parasympathetic state that the repair requires. Also, likely the motility is going to be slower in the body, right? And when that happens and you aren't able to clear properly as quickly as you need to, that inflammatory load just builds up, right? And so basically the barrier is perpetually trying to heal in conditions that literally won't allow it. And beyond these, every mineral in the full matrix plays a role, right? Calcium in cell signaling and tight junction regulation, potassium in cellular hydration and electrical charge, sodium in fluid balance and mucosal integrity, sulfur in glutathione production and toxification capacity. We got iron and oxygen delivery to healing tissue, selenium and immune regulation and antioxidant defense, right? So, this is why the conversation about minerals and gut barrier health cannot be reduced to any freaking supplement list that somebody's going to tell you. It's not like, okay, take zinc and magnesium and call it done, right? It's the entire mineral terrain that has to be assessed and rebuilt because minerals work in concert. They are interdependent upon each other, right? So excess of one depletes another. Like there's an antagonism that can go on, right? Deficiency in one impairs the function of several others, right? You just can't optimize one mineral in isolation and expect the system to respond as if the whole terrain has been addressed. And then there's this catch 22, right? Obviously, a compromised barrier is going to impair our mineral absorption, right? Because the majority of our minerals are absorbed in the small bowel, right? So those same tight junctions responsible for keeping that inflammatory load out are also responsible for regulating what gets absorbed in. And so when they're compromised, your ability to absorb minerals from food and supplements is significantly reduced. You can be taking the right things and absorbing a fraction of what you think you are. And this is the loop that keeps people stuck. This is why terrain sequencing matters because, you know, you can't just throw a bunch of supplements at a compromised barrier and expect radical transformation, right? You do need to create the conditions. You need to get the conditions better for absorption, right? Reduce the inflammatory load that's going on in your system specifically, support your motility, address mineral depletion in a way that accounts for the absorption problem itself, right? Just like you can't turn a compacted monoculture lawn into a thriving garden overnight just by throwing a bunch of seeds at it. I mean, you could get some results, but you're not going to get anywhere near the optimal thriving situation you would like, right? The soil has to be reconditioned first, right? The structure has to be rebuilt. And so that mineral matrix has to be restored intentionally um, before what you plant there can actually take hold and thrive, right? So I say all this, it sounds simple in theory, right? And in it's real work in practice and it is doable and it works when it's approached in the right sequence. Okay, so if this episode landed, if you've been listening and recognizing yourself in any of it, there is a clear path forward. It's not more guessing. It's not more random supplements you found on TikTok or Instagram. It's a real map of your actual terrain. And you can learn more about my structured 4-month process inside minerals and microbes to rebuild it. You can find the details in the show notes. I onboard a small number of new clients each month. Go ahead and read through everything over there. If you have questions beyond that, you're welcome to email me. Otherwise, the information you need to get started is all there. So check that out if that's something you would like deeper support with. And that's it. That's what I have for you guys today. I really feel understanding the why and the what behind how you're feeling matters. Understanding how your body works matters. So I hope you found this helpful. And if you did, feel free to share this episode with someone else who might need to hear it. And leave me a review if you've been finding value here. And I will see you guys on the next episode. Until then, stay wild and stay well.